Hey guys, tonight we drift back to an age when heroes weren't born, they were brewed in divine drama and parental anxiety. You're standing in the silver light of the Aegean coast, where waves lick at the sand like lazy cats, and somewhere between sea foam and thunder, a woman is deciding whether her baby should be mortal. That's Thetis, sea nymph, shapeshifter, and reluctant mom-to-be. She's engaged, somewhat against her will, to Peleus, a mortal king who somehow caught her heart or, depending on which poet you ask, simply caught her. You probably wouldn't survive their wedding reception, it's half banquet, half god fight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins in mythic Phthia, with Thetis and Peleus celebrating their union, a match arranged by Zeus himself. The gods attended, the muses sang, and everyone feasted until Eris, goddess of discord, showed up uninvited. She tossed an apple labeled to the fairest into the crowd, and chaos bloomed like wildfire. That little act of divine pettiness would later spiral into the Trojan War itself, though nobody realized it yet. Somewhere amid the shouting, laughter, and half-drunken immortals, Thetis conceived a child, one destined to be greater than his father and maybe even to outshine the gods themselves. When Achilles was born, Thetis looked at him the way a storm watches its own lightning, proud, terrified, and certain it would destroy something. She wanted him immortal. But gods and mortals weren't meant to mix too easily, so she devised her own method. Depending on which storyteller you trust, she either dipped him in the river Styx or smeared him with ambrosia and held him over a sacred fire at night, trying to burn away his mortality. It's a pretty bold parenting technique. Modern moms might prefer sunscreen. But the myth says that as she gripped him by one heel, the flame or river never touched that part. Thus, Achilles became nearly invulnerable, save for the tiny spot that would make him famous. Historians still argue whether this heel myth was an original Greek belief or a later poetic flourish. Some suggest the invulnerability theme came much later, perhaps inspired by tales of invincible Eastern heroes. Others think it's symbolic, that even the mightiest warrior has a weak spot. Something every human, ancient or not, understands too well. As Achilles grew, his presence drew omens. The Delphic oracle whispered of a paradox: he could live a long, unremarkable life or die young with eternal glory. Basically, it was the first recorded case of the live fast, die famous lifestyle. Thetis, naturally, tried to outsmart fate. But even gods have trouble with destiny. It's like trying to outswim your own reflection. While mortal midwives admired the baby's flawless skin, the sea below murmured darker prophecies. The Nereids, Thetis' sisters, warned that Achilles would become both the pride and grief of Greece. They didn't know when or how, just that his story was already stitched into time. Somewhere far off, the faint hum of Troy's towers shimmered in the distance like a mirage. One quirky tidbit: ancient pottery sometimes shows Thetis holding Achilles in a sort of upside-down toddler position, half dipping him into flames while Peleus watches with a look that screams, "We didn't discuss this in prenatal class." It's both horrifying and oddly domestic. But that's the tone of Greek myth, equal parts divine majesty and household chaos. You can almost smell the salt and hear the waves whisper against the cradle. Baby Achilles doesn't cry, he just stares with eyes that seem too old for their size, as if he already knows the world expects too much of him. His mother hums lullabies in an ancient tongue, each note soaked in sea breeze and inevitability. And though she tries to protect him from mortality, she also plants the first seed of tragedy, because the moment you try to escape death, it begins following you more closely. As the boy sleeps, gods argue in Olympus about his future. Some say he'll defend Greece, others, that he'll destroy it. The fates themselves are already weaving threads, gold for glory, red for rage. And one thin black strand that trails from his heel. It's quiet now, the way all great beginnings are quiet, but beneath the calm, the world prepares for storm. And you, watching through time, can sense that this story won't end in peace. Achilles may be a baby tonight, but soon he'll outgrow lullabies. He'll outgrow safety. He'll outgrow even his mother's love. For now, though, the sea hums softly, the torches fade, and the cradle rocks. You can almost hear Thetis whisper, "Sleep, little one. The world is waiting." Morning light slips through the mists of Mount Pelion, where the air smells faintly of pine, honey, and damp earth. You follow the sound of hooves crunching gravel. It's not a horse, not quite. It's Chiron, the wise centaur, half man and half horse, and entirely too patient to be stuck babysitting Achilles. But here he is, teaching a boy who refuses to sit still how to throw a spear, how to bandage a wound, and how to tell the difference between an edible berry and one that'll have you seeing gods you weren't supposed to. Chiron's cave feels like a natural university. Animal pelts hang beside scrolls of philosophy. Harps lean against racks of hunting spears. It's the sort of place where you could learn to heal or to kill depending on how your morning went. And in that balance, Achilles thrives. One moment he's charmingly curious, the next, he's trying to wrestle a bear because, as he later explains, it looked at me funny. You trudge beside him as he grows older, watching him run up cliffs barefoot, his golden hair catching light like polished bronze. He learns music and medicine, poetry and swordsmanship. Chiron tries to teach moderation, but moderation slides off Achilles like rain on marble. Even as a boy, he burns brighter than the fire he trains beside. One mainstream fact scholars agree on: Achilles' education under Chiron is part of a larger Greek tradition of heroes being mentored by centaurs. Jason, Heracles, and even Asclepius all passed through the same school of hard wisdom. Chiron isn't just a teacher, he's civilization's attempt to tame raw power with reason. But some myths hint at how that balance never quite sticks. There's a quieter side to Achilles, too, one that hums soft melodies on a lyre Chiron carved for him. You can picture him sitting at the cave's mouth at sunset, fingers tracing notes that ripple down the mountainside like threads of amber light. Even then, he sings of war, though he doesn't know what war feels like yet. It's a bit like a kid pretending to be a firefighter before ever seeing a flame. Chiron often says, a hero's first battle is with his own pride, and Achilles, still too young to shave, just grins and races the wind. You can almost hear the centaur sigh. But there's love in that sigh. A quirky myth says Achilles once hunted down a wild boar that had been terrorizing local villages, only to release it afterward because it fought well. Another claims he tried to spear a shadow one night, convinced it was a ghost sent by Hades. Historians still argue whether these tales were later moral fables or genuine fragments of older oral traditions meant to fill the gaps before Troy. Either way, they show a boy trying to test every limit, even the unseen ones. One evening, Thetis visits. The sea herself seems to roll closer when she walks. She brings with her the smell of salt and storm, the soft hiss of foam retreating over stones. She strokes her son's hair, tracing that heel, still smooth, still mortal, and tells him she dreams of cities burning. Chiron watches from the shadows, knowing prophecies cling to Achilles like burrs to a traveler's cloak. The next morning, Achilles wakes early and runs to the peak of the mountain. You follow him through dew and fog, your breath joining his. From the summit, the world opens, a blur of distant seas and tiny villages. He stands there, bare-chested and defiant, and for the first time, whispers something that sounds dangerously close to prayer. Let them remember me. That line echoes, carried by wind and centuries. You almost want to interrupt him, to say that being remembered isn't always kind. But he wouldn't listen. He's too full of hunger, for speed, for meaning, for something that burns as brightly as he does. Historians still debate if Achilles ever existed as a real Mycenaean warrior or if he's the embodiment of an entire generation's longing for immortal fame. Some point to fragments of ancient armor found near Phthia, others think he was purely poetic, a shared dream of perfection and ruin. But myths endure because they feel true, not because they are. By the time Chiron deems him ready, Achilles can run all day without tiring and heal wounds faster than most can notice them. He can play the lyre gently enough to make wolves stop howling. Yet, beneath that polish, there's still the restless pulse of something untamed. The centaur knows that when this boy leaves, the world will feel his footsteps for centuries. That night, the mountain goes quiet. Crickets hum. A single torch burns low near the cave entrance. Achilles packs his few belongings, his spear, his music, his arrogance, and looks back at Chiron. No words pass between them. They don't need any. The teacher nods, the student nods back. You can almost hear time take a deep breath, knowing the world has just lost its last peaceful version of Achilles. The wind tugs at your hair as you follow him down the slope, toward prophecy, toward war, toward songs that will never end. Above, Chiron whispers a final prayer to the stars, may wisdom catch him before glory does. But of course, it won't. You find yourself in Phthia again, years later, where the boy who once wrestled shadows has grown into a man who can wrestle fate itself, though fate, inconveniently, doesn't tap out. Achilles now moves through the palace like a storm in sandals, quick, beautiful, and impossible to ignore. The people whisper about him, half god, half problem. His mother, Thetis, hasn't aged a day, the sea never does. She still visits, still tries to save him from prophecies, but those warnings are starting to sound like background music to Achilles' ego. One summer night, she appears in his chamber, dripping seawater onto the marble floor. My son, she says, you will have to choose. And that's the moment. The crossroads every myth needs. The choice between a long, ordinary life or a short, blazing one that will echo forever. It's basically the ancient version of choosing between a stable office job and becoming a rock star who burns out at 27. Achilles doesn't answer. He just looks out at the horizon where the Aegean hums with wind and ghosts. You can tell he's already decided. Historians still argue whether this prophecy, recorded first by Hesiod, then expanded by Homer, was part of an older Mycenaean warrior ethos or a later Greek reflection on the cost of fame. Some say it mirrors the real-world tension between Kleos, glory, and Nostos, homecoming, two ideals no hero could have at once. Whatever the case, Thetis can see it in his eyes. Her son was born for glory, not comfort. And that realization cracks something inside her, so she tries every trick in the Divine Parent Handbook. First, she hides his weapons, hoping he'll forget the world outside. Then she begs the gods to redirect the war elsewhere. And finally, when rumors spread that Greek kings are recruiting warriors for an expedition against Troy, she resorts to something both absurd and oddly human. She hides her son among women. Yes, that's right. The invincible demigod, Achilles, gets shipped off to the island of Skyros disguised as a girl named Pyrrha, which literally means the red-haired one. It's like sending Thor undercover at a high school dance, but before that little masquerade begins, there's a strange calm, a waiting period when Achilles still roams the palace courtyards, uncertain but restless. He practices with his spear at dawn, shadowboxes with invisible foes at dusk, and sometimes plays the lyre until servants stop to listen. He's terrifying and tender at once, a paradox wrapped in sandals. A lesser-known tidbit from ancient commentary claims that Achilles once confided in Patroclus during this time. That he feared not death itself but being forgotten. The line supposedly came from a lost fragment of the Aethiopis, a post-Homeric epic. It's hard not to hear the heartbeat of every ambitious soul in that confession. Thetis, desperate, consults oracles. She even visits Zeus, but the king of gods shrugs. Fate, he tells her, is a web already woven. Even I can't cut the thread, he says. And that's when Thetis understands the truth that every mythic parent eventually learns: you can't outsmart destiny, you can only delay its arrival. Still, she delays it beautifully. On Skyros, Achilles will dance in bright silks, pretend to gossip about jewelry, and try not to flex too obviously. You'll see that soon. But for now, imagine him standing on the cliffs of Thia, the salt wind tangling his hair, the taste of the sea sharp on his lips. His mother's hand lingers on his shoulder. If only, she whispers, mortality weren't so fragile. He smiles faintly. If only immortality weren't so dull. The line hits differently when you realize he means it. There's a pulse of defiance beneath his calm, a simmering certainty that life isn't meant to be long, it's meant to burn. You might think it's arrogance. Maybe it is. But part of you understands him, don't you? That hunger to matter. The quiet terror of blending into history's background noise. You and Achilles, separated by 3,000 years, share that same tug toward significance. A fringe theory, half joking, half scholarly, suggests that Achilles' story reflects early Greek anxiety about the transition from oral heroism to written legacy. The idea that being sung about became the new immortality. If that's true, then Achilles didn't just choose glory, he chose storytelling itself. By now, the palace torches flicker low. Thetis stands at the door, her eyes bright with the kind of grief that doesn't fade. Just folds inward. Tomorrow she'll disguise her son and send him away to hide from war, but tonight she lets herself hold him one last time. Achilles doesn't resist. He may be a demigod, but he's still her child. Outside, thunder stirs faintly over the sea. It sounds almost like laughter, the kind of laughter gods make when humans think they've found loopholes in fate. Thetis doesn't hear it. Or maybe she does and chooses to ignore it. For now, there's only the rhythm of waves, the hush of prophecy waiting to unfold, and a mother who knows she's about to lose her son, not to death yet, but to destiny. And destiny, once it's awake, never goes back to sleep. You blink, and the world shifts to the island of Skyros, a place so green it almost hums. Waves kiss the rocky shore in lazy rhythms, birds flit through olive trees, and somewhere in a royal courtyard, a group of maidens is laughing. Among them, one moves differently, taller, quicker, eyes too sharp for embroidery. That's Achilles, though you wouldn't know it from the bright tunic and jewelry clinking around his wrists. His new name? Pyrrha. The red-haired girl. Because apparently, when your disguise plan relies on not looking suspicious, red hair is subtle. You walk beside him as he adjusts the scarf for the 100th time. He hates it. Every giggle from the other women makes his shoulders twitch. But Thetis insists it's the only way to outwit fate, hide him where no soldier would think to look. To be fair, it's working so far. Nobody's tried to recruit a giggling maiden with forearms like marble columns. Historians still argue whether Achilles' time on Skyros ever happened or if it was a later mythic insert to humanize him. Some say it symbolizes the suppression of heroism, the warrior forced to live among peace. Others just think the Greeks loved a good cross-dressing story. Either way, this part of his legend lingers because it's oddly relatable. He's trapped between two identities, who he is and who he's pretending to be, a quirky tidbit. Skyros was famous for its bright fabrics and perfumes. And Achilles supposedly became weirdly good at mixing fragrances. Later poets joke that he could have opened the first Mycenaean spa if war hadn't called. Imagine that, Achilles' company, invincible sense. Days pass in a kind of uneasy calm. You watch him spar secretly in the courtyard at dawn, using broom handles instead of spears. One morning, a princess named Didymia catches him mid-practice. She doesn't scream, she just watches, fascinated. "You move like someone who's seen death," she says. He shrugs. "Only in stories." But stories, as they both know, have teeth. What follows between them is part tenderness, part mythic rumor. Some say they fall in love, others say it's merely curiosity meeting curiosity. Still, Thetis' plan begins to fray. You can hide a hero, but you can't teach him to stay hidden. Then, one day, a ship anchors offshore. Odysseus has arrived, you hear his laughter before you see him, the clever king of Ithaca, all wit and mischief. He's been sent by Agamemnon to recruit heroes for the coming war against Troy. And rumor says he already suspects where Thetis has stashed her son. Odysseus knows tricks, but he also knows pride. So, he doesn't ask for Achilles by name. Instead, he sets a trap. He brings gifts for the maidens, fine jewelry, bright silks, and perfumes, and among them, quietly lays a gleaming spear and a shield. Then he calls for music, claiming he wants to thank them for their hospitality. You stand in the hall with them, feeling the soft hum of lyres, the faint laughter, the scent of lavender. But when Odysseus suddenly orders his men to blow a war trumpet outside, the music stops. Instinct takes over. Achilles, forgetting his disguise, snatches up the spear and whirls toward the sound, eyes blazing. The room falls silent. One of the girls gasps. Odysseus just smiles. "Found you," he says. Historians still debate whether this moment represents fate catching up or simply human nature refusing to be buried. Either way, it's electric. The disguise drops, the world tilts, and the war, waiting patiently all this time, finally calls his name aloud. That night, Thetis appears again, her eyes reflecting both pride and heartbreak. "I tried," she whispers. Achilles nods. "I know." He doesn't blame her. Destiny was always going to find him. The only question was when. Didymia stands in the doorway, saying nothing. In some versions, she bears him a son, Neoptolemus, who will later fight at Troy after Achilles' death. It's a quiet, tragic symmetry, the son finishing what the father began. But that's still far away. For now, she watches the ship's sails fill with wind as Achilles boards beside Odysseus. The sea breeze smells of salt and iron. Thetis follows along the shore, her fingers skimming the waves like someone trying to hold on to what's already gone. Achilles doesn't look back, though maybe he wants to. His voice carries faintly over the water, "Tell the sea I'll make her proud." You can almost feel the gods leaning in, amused. Zeus stirs the clouds, Athena whispers to the wind. The game has begun. Achilles is no longer hiding. He's stepping straight into legend, into blood, into song, and as Skyros fades behind him, you sense that nothing will ever be calm again. The sea stretches endlessly, a dark mirror rippling under bronze sunlight. You stand on deck beside Achilles, who seems carved from the same wind that fills the sails. Around him, the Achaean fleet gathers, hundreds of ships creaking, shouting, shimmering like a forest of masts. This is the call to Troy, the great adventure poets would bleed ink over for centuries. For Achilles, though, it's simpler. Finally, something worthy of him. The wind smells of salt and ambition. Odysseus leans against the railing, eyes sharp and amused. Diomedes is already bragging about future conquests. Menelaus stares toward the horizon, jaw set with quiet fury, his wife Helen stolen, his pride punctured. And somewhere, Agamemnon, king of kings, counts his soldiers like coins. You'd think Achilles might feel intimidated among such figures. Instead, he looks bored. He's brought his own small army, the Myrmidons, dark-armored warriors from Phthia, loyal to him alone. Among them moves Patroclus, his closest companion, half friend, half brother in spirit. The bond between them hums in the air, strong, unspoken, and fated to end in tears. Historians still argue about what exactly Patroclus was to Achilles, comrade, lover, cousin, or all of the above. The ambiguity itself might be the point, their connection defies categories, belonging to that liminal space where affection becomes devotion. In any case, Patroclus is the calm to Achilles' fire, the one who makes sure meals get eaten and temper stays, mostly, intact. One quirky tidbit, Homer never calls Achilles invincible. That was later fan lore, really. In the Iliad, he's strong, fast, favored by gods, but still mortal, still bleeding when cut. The heel myth hadn't fully solidified yet. Which means, right now, on this deck, Achilles doesn't think of himself as untouchable. Just unstoppable. The ships finally make landfall on Aulis, the staging ground for the invasion. It's chaos, horses neighing, sails flapping, captains arguing about winds and omens. The priests mutter that Artemis is angry, that she's holding back the breeze because Agamemnon shot one of her sacred deer. And here enters one of Greek myth's darker parent-child moments. To calm the goddess, Agamemnon is told he must sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia. You don't see the act itself. Ancient storytellers disagreed on whether she actually dies or gets swapped by a divine illusion, but Achilles gets roped into the drama anyway. The ruse goes that Iphigenia is being married to him as a pretext for her arrival. When he realizes the truth, he nearly kills Agamemnon on the spot. It's the first spark between them, the first taste of the pride versus power dynamic that will later explode into full-blown fury. Thetis warnings echo faintly in your mind: beware the kings of men, they will steal your honor before your life. But the winds turn at last, and the fleet sails. The horizon is dotted with black holes slicing through foam, sails puffed like lungs inhaling destiny. For 9 days they travel, singing war songs, sharpening blades, telling each other lies about how glorious battle will be. On the 10th morning, Troy appears. A walled jewel rising from the plains, its towers gleaming in dawn light. Achilles stands at the prow, his hair whipping in the wind, his armor reflecting gold. He smiles. So that's the city that'll make me famous, he says, half to himself. You might want to tell him fame usually comes with fine print, but he's already too far gone. They land with thunder. Spears thud into sand. Shields crash. The first Achaean warrior to leap ashore is Patroclus, who promptly dies, fulfilling a prophecy that the first man to touch Trojan soil would perish. Achilles watches the body fall, tilts his head, and mutters, "Guess I'll be second." Historians still argue whether this scene was a later poetic addition meant to dramatize the invasion. Some scholars suggest it mirrors real Bronze Age beachhead tactics, others think it's just Homer turning logistics into theater. Either way, the landing marks a shift, from anticipation to reality. The first skirmishes are messy, hot, and loud. You can almost smell the bronze and blood mingling under the sun. Achilles leads the Myrmidons like a flame across dry grass, swift and merciless. He cuts through Trojan defenders with frightening grace, never cruel, just efficient, like a storm doing what storms do. When night falls, the beach becomes both home and battlefield. Fires crackle. The air smells of roasted meat and wet sand. Achilles sits beside Patroclus, wiping his blade clean. "Do you think this will last long?" Patroclus asks. Achilles shrugs. "If it does, maybe I'll get bored enough to end it." There's a smile there, small and fleeting. But you sense the weight beneath it, the unspoken awareness that this war will outlast laughter. The ships rock gently in the tide, their hulls whispering to one another like old conspirators. The moon hangs low, silvering the sea. You look at Achilles and realize he's not just marching into legend, he's already halfway there. And somewhere, far beyond the waves, the gods are leaning in closer, waiting to see what he'll do next. Dawn at the beaches of Troy doesn't look heroic, it looks damp, loud, and full of sand in places sand shouldn't be. You can smell the sweat and salt, hear the rhythmic hammering of armor being mended, the dull thud of shields tested, and the low hum of men pretending they're not afraid. Achilles, though, seems immune to all of it. He moves through the chaos like sunlight gliding over a restless sea. The first battles have come and gone, and now the Greeks are building their camp, hammering stakes, dragging ships onto shore to serve as walls. The ground is scorched, trampled, littered with spear splinters. Troy looms in the distance, its walls impossibly tall, almost smug. For all their divine armor and endless bravado, the Greeks can't take it yet. The city watches them like a patient predator, but in these early years of war, yes, years, Achilles is in his element. Every morning he rides out with the myrmidons, bronze flashing, feet barely touching ground. His chariot wheels throw up fountains of dust. He becomes the name Trojans whisper like a curse. Historians still debate how much of these early conquests Homer invented. Some say Achilles' campaign against surrounding Trojan allied cities was mythic embroidery, others point to archaeological finds suggesting waves of smaller raids that match his legend eerily well. The truth, as usual, probably sits somewhere in the murky middle, half history, half poetry. Among the spoils of these raids are treasures, cattle, captives, tokens of victory and ego. Achilles returns each time with stories and a faintly smug grin. Patroclus listens, cleans the dust from his armor, and quietly makes sure Achilles actually eats something. Their friendship deepens here, in this long limbo between glory and boredom. A quirky tidbit from a later poet says that when Achilles wasn't fighting, he'd lounge near the shoreline carving tiny ships from driftwood and sending them out to sea, each one bearing the name of a fallen comrade. Whether that's true or not, you can almost picture it, the greatest warrior of Greece, sitting cross-legged on the sand, setting miniature fleets adrift as the real war grinds on, and grind it does. The siege of Troy is no swift affair, it drags like a song sung too slowly. The Greeks win battles, lose them, rebuild, repeat. The Trojans counter, led by Hector, their prince and champion, who fights not for glory but for duty, which might be rarer and harder. Achilles and Hector have not yet met blade to blade, but both already feel the other's presence across the battlefield like twin storms sensing each other's pressure. At night, the camp smells of smoke and metal. Achilles sometimes plays his lyre again. A habit that confuses new recruits. They whisper that he sings to calm the gods, or himself. The melody drifts over the surf, melancholy but proud. Even Agamemnon, who commands him, doesn't quite know what to make of the man. He's an asset and a problem, both essential and insufferable. You walk with Achilles through the makeshift alleys of tents, hearing soldiers boast about him in one breath and grumble in the next. He thinks he's better than us, one mutters. Patroclus just smiles softly. He is. Historians still argue whether Achilles' mythic charisma was modeled after real elite Mycenaean warriors, the kind who were semi-divine in status, commanding loyalty through sheer magnetism. The Iliad, in that sense, might be less about one man and more about a whole type of person, the born conqueror who can't survive peacetime. One evening, as the sun bleeds over the sea, Achilles watches the horizon quietly. "They call me invincible," he says. "But invincible men don't dream." Patroclus tilts his head. "What do you dream?" "Running," Achilles answers, "but the ground never ends." That line hangs heavy in the dusk, a hint of the exhaustion beneath his golden glow. Even heroes get tired, though they'll never admit it in daylight. Soon, word spreads through the camp that the Greeks have taken nearby towns, Lesbos, Lyrnessus, and others, and that Achilles himself captured a woman named Briseis, a noble Trojan widow. She becomes his prize, his symbol of victory, and, ironically, the spark that will ignite the greatest quarrel in mythic history. But for now, she's silent, the war's spoils embodied. Achilles treats her kindly enough, which in the context of Bronze Age warfare is saying something. Still, the unease grows, the nights stretch longer. The drums of war echo less frequently. Even victory can become monotonous. Achilles begins to feel it, that creeping emptiness that comes when you've done everything right and the world still feels slightly wrong. You sense it too, walking through the quiet campfires, the lull before everything falls apart. The wind from the sea carries the smell of salt and destiny. Somewhere, an owl calls from the dunes. Achilles stands at the water's edge, staring toward Troy, and you almost hear what he doesn't say, "Let it be worthy of me, tomorrow will test that wish." And when it does, the world will hold its breath. Morning breaks unevenly, like the light itself is reluctant to shine on what's coming. The camp stirs with the usual clatter, shields clanging, fire crackling, but beneath it all hums a tension sharp enough to draw blood. You can feel it in the air, prickling against your skin. Something is about to snap. It begins not on the battlefield but in the council tent, which is somehow more dangerous. The Greeks have been struck by plague, men dropping in droves, their cries filling the night. Arrows of Apollo, the priests say, shot from the god's invisible bow in punishment. Agamemnon, the self-styled king of kings, paces and fumes, demanding to know which mortal offended the heavens this time. Then the prophet Calchas clears his throat, visibly regretting his profession. "It's you, my lord," he mutters. "You dishonored Apollo's priest, Chryses, by refusing to return his daughter." You can imagine the silence that follows, one of those thick, heavy pauses where even the flies stop buzzing. Agamemnon scowls, forced to give the girl back to save the army, but his pride can't bear the loss. So, he turns, slowly, toward Achilles. "If I must lose my prize," Agamemnon says, "then I'll take yours." The tense air seems to freeze. Achilles, radiant and calm on the surface, feels his blood ignite underneath. Briseis, his captive but also his symbol of worth, is dragged from his tent. The injustice burns brighter than Apollo's arrows. Historians still argue whether this quarrel represents a real military hierarchy breakdown or simply Homer's exploration of ego. Either way, it's the spark that splits the legend in half. Achilles' rage isn't just personal, it's existential. He has spent his entire life chasing glory, and now the man who commands him treats him like a pawn. He steps forward, eyes like stormlight. "You greedy, shameless dog," he says softly. "You take from me what I earned with blood." Agamemnon smirks. "You think you're untouchable? Remember who leads this army." For a moment, the world tilts. Achilles grips his sword, one motion away from killing a king. And then, out of nowhere, Athena appears. To everyone else, she's invisible, but Achilles feels her hand on his shoulder. "Not yet," she whispers. "Glory comes in patience too." He exhales, trembling. Slowly, he sheaths his blade. "Fine," he says, voice like ice. "Take her. But when the Trojans burn your ships, don't call for me." And he walks out, just like that, leaving the entire Greek war machine sputtering in disbelief. It's a strange kind of silence that follows his absence. Without Achilles, the battlefield shifts like a tide receding. The Myrmidons refuse to fight. The morale collapses. The Trojans surge forward, emboldened. You can almost hear Hector's laugh echo from the walls of Troy, a quirky historical tidbit. In some later versions of the myth, Achilles spends his sulk by the beach writing songs about past heroes and playing dice with Patroclus. Others claim he simply sat and stared at the sea for days, speaking to no one but Thetis through the wind. You get the feeling that both could be true. Meanwhile, the Greek army suffers. Men die. Agamemnon's authority crumbles. His soldiers mutter that perhaps a mortal king shouldn't have insulted someone half divine. The camp stinks of smoke, sweat, and resentment. Patroclus watches Achilles with growing unease. "You can't let them die out there," he says quietly. "They chose their king," Achilles replies, voice flat. "Now they can live, or die, by him." Historians still debate whether Achilles' refusal to fight is an act of pride, protest, or the earliest recorded case of burnout. But whatever you call it, his absence defines the middle years of the Trojan War. Without him, the story turns gray and grinding. One night, a Greek scout returns breathless, reporting that Hector himself has driven the Greeks back to their ships. Fires light up the horizon. Achilles doesn't move. He sits beside the water, staring at his reflection. "They want a hero," he murmurs, "but they never ask what the hero wants." Patroclus clenches his fists. "Then let me go in your place. I'll wear your armor." The men will think you've returned. The night seems to hold its breath. Achilles studies him, torn between love and dread. You'll die, he says simply, then let me die useful. The next morning, Achilles stands silent as Patroclus dons his gleaming armor. The sea wind rustles through the Myrmidons' ranks. Even the gulls seem quieter. Remember, Achilles says finally, drive them back, but don't chase Hector. You can almost hear the gods chuckle from Olympus. They know how little mortals listen to warnings wrapped in love. Patroclus rides off, brilliant as sunrise, and the Greeks roar back to life. From afar, Achilles watches the tide of battle turn, his name shouted across the field once more. For a brief, painful moment, he smiles, but even from the shore, you feel the dread creeping in, the chill before a storm. You know what's coming, what he doesn't yet. The war has waited long enough for its tragedy to begin. Smoke rises over the Aegean like a god's breath. From Achilles' tent, you can see it, a dark column marking the edge of no return. Out there, Greeks and Trojans clash. Horses scream. Shields splinter. Bronze flashes like lightning. At the center, wearing Achilles' armor, Patroclus fights as if born for it. From afar, even gods could mistake him for Achilles. The Myrmidons surge with new fire. The Trojans falter. For a moment, the Greeks believe the tide has turned. Achilles watches from shore, heart hammering. He knows every move Patroclus makes, because he taught him. The armor gleams like a lie too bright to last. Patroclus drives the Trojans to their gates. Even Hector wavers. Victory feels close, but momentum blinds him. He ignores Achilles' warning and charges to Troy's walls. Apollo strikes from behind, not to kill, but to remind. Patroclus staggers. Hector doesn't hesitate. His spear finds its mark. The sound, metal, breath, silence, will echo in Achilles' nightmares forever. The Myrmidons fall back with Patroclus' broken body. Dust swirls. The gods look away. When word reaches camp, it spreads like fire. A soldier kneels before Achilles. He's gone, he whispers. The silence that follows isn't human. Achilles freezes, breath shattering. Then the cry comes, an earthquake tearing through tents, dunes, Olympus itself. In old tellings, Thetis rises from the sea that night, cradling her son. You warned me, Achilles whispers. You told me I'd die if I killed Hector. And yet, she answers, your heart already has. At dawn, Hephaestus' new armor gleams on the sand, divine, radiant. Achilles nods once, like a man shaking hands with fate. We march, he tells the Myrmidons. Not for glory. For him. Even Agamemnon is silent. The war has outgrown politics, it belongs to poetry now. Before leaving, Achilles kneels by Patroclus' body. You won't be forgotten. He murmurs. A breeze stirs the sand. The sun catches the bronze shield, a world engraved on it, one Achilles will never live to see. His path is set. No god will change it. He rises, lifts his spear, and walks toward Troy. The war breathes again, harder, louder, and for the first time in years, Achilles smiles, not with joy, but with the calm of a man who has nothing left to lose. The morning of revenge smells like iron and sea salt. You wake to the rasp of whetstones, the hush of prayers, the air thick with promise of death. Behind the dunes, Achilles stands motionless, sunlight crawling up the divine armor Hephaestus forged, a gleam so bright it feels like a warning. Even the shield tells stories, peace, war, harvest, dance. A universe he'll carry into legend. When he walks to his chariot, the wind parts. The Myrmidons follow like shadows. No man, no god, can stop him now. Historians call this the birth of the tragic hero, the man who knows his fate and walks toward it anyway. Before leaving, he kneels beside Patroclus' wrapped body. His hand trembles. "Forgive me," he whispers. "You were the better man." Then something inside him goes still. Hector waits beneath Troy's walls. When Achilles' war cry splits the air, Trojans flinch. He doesn't fight, he unravels the battlefield. His spear is too fast, his chariot cuts through ranks, and the Scamander River itself rises against him, offended by the blood. But even the river can't stop him. Some say a fish leapt to his feet as he emerged from the flood, an omen of surrender. On Olympus, even Ares murmurs, that one fights like he's already dead. Finally, Hector stands alone. They face each other across the churned plain, battle fading to silence. Hector knows he's doomed. He glances once at the gates. Then raises his spear. They circle, bronze flashing, breath harsh. For a moment, it's just two men against destiny. Achilles feints, strikes the weak point in Hector's armor. The sound isn't triumph, it's heartbreak. "I beg you," Hector rasps, "return my body to my family." Achilles' face hardens. No, he ties the corpse to his chariot and drags it back, the most infamous act of desecration in myth. Later poets blamed grief. Maybe they were right. That night, while the Greeks celebrate, Achilles sits alone beside Patroclus' pyre. The flames paint his armor gold, but nothing warms him. For all his vengeance, the world still feels hollow. The war goes on. For Achilles, it's already over. He's done everything a man can do. The rest is waiting. The smoke from Hector's funeral pyre still clings to the dawn, faint and bitter. You can smell it in the sea breeze as you walk past the Greek tents, the scent of burned wood, bronze, and a little bit of regret. Even the gulls are quiet. Achilles hasn't slept. He sits near the shore, where the waves fold and unfold like restless thoughts. The war has slowed again, but he hasn't. Every night, he drags Hector's lifeless body around Patroclus' tomb, refusing to let grief soften into memory. It's as if punishing the dead could somehow soothe the living, but grief doesn't work that way, and neither do gods. Up on Olympus, even Zeus is starting to frown. "Enough," he says, watching Achilles' ceaseless rage. "The boy dishonors us all." And because divine patience is limited, they send someone to intervene, not a soldier, not a rival, but Hector's father, the old king Priam himself. Historians still argue whether Priam's night visit to the Greek camp is symbolic fiction or an ancient diplomatic memory wrapped in myth. Either way, it's one of the most human moments in the entire Trojan story. Imagine it, an old man sneaking into the enemy's camp, guided by Hermes through a maze of sleeping guards and dying fires. The night hums with danger. In his hands, he carries gold, ransom for his son's body. But what he really carries is courage made of sorrow. He steps into Achilles' tent. The light from the fire flickers over the young warrior's face. Hollow eyes, hair unkempt, armor scattered like shed skin. Priam kneels, trembling. "I have done what no man should," he says. "I have kissed the hands that killed my son." The silence that follows is unbearable. Even you, standing invisibly beside them, hold your breath. Achilles looks down at him, and for a long, terrible heartbeat, no one knows what he'll do. Then something breaks. The rage, the pride, the godlike fury, it all cracks open. Achilles weeps. He reaches out and helps the old man to his feet. "We suffer the same," he whispers. "You for your son, I for my friend." It's a rare, fleeting peace. Two enemies, bound by love and loss, sharing the only language both can still speak. Achilles orders the servants to wash Hector's body, to prepare it for return. For the first time in what feels like centuries, his voice is gentle. A quirky detail from a later commentator claims that Achilles served Priam dinner that night, bread and roasted meat, as if they were family instead of enemies. The idea seems almost absurd, but somehow comforting. In the middle of all this ruin, humanity flickers like a candle that refuses to go out. When Priam leaves at dawn, leading the wagon that bears his son, Achilles stands in the doorway and watches. The wind tugs at his hair. His armor hangs loosely now, as though even the metal mourns. He turns back toward the sea, toward Patroclus' mound. "It's done," he says quietly. He rests. But in his chest, the prophecy still beats like a second heart. He knows what's coming. Thetis has told him again and again, once Hector falls, Achilles' own death follows. Historians still debate the meaning of this fatal symmetry. Was it an early form of moral justice, a cosmic balance? Or was it just the poetic inevitability that ancient storytellers loved? Either way, you can feel it closing in. For a while, though, there's a strange calm. The Trojans mourn. The Greeks rebuild their ships. Even the gods seem to step back, content to watch the tide of fate roll out naturally. Achilles walks the beach most mornings, barefoot, his once proud stride softened into something almost human. The sun glitters on his armor like a memory he's outgrown. He still speaks to Patroclus sometimes, quietly, like one side of a conversation that will never be answered. "Do you remember the olive grove near Phthia?" He murmurs once. "We used to race to the river. You always let me win." You realize, with a little ache, that for all the grandeur of his legend, Achilles' story is really about love, the kind that outlasts pride, war, and even reason, but love is also what leads him to his end, because somewhere in Troy, a new name is being whispered, Penthesilea. Queen of the Amazons. Warrior, hunter, fierce as flame. She's come to fight for Troy, and she will meet Achilles on the field before the week is done, and in that meeting, something strange will happen. Something that makes even a man who's outrun destiny pause and look at his enemy not with hatred, but something like sorrowful wonder. The sea keeps moving. The fires die down. The sky brightens. But you can already feel it, that slow pull toward the inevitable. The gods have had their fun, now they want their ending, and Achilles, ever the beautiful fool, is ready to give it to them. The day Penthesilea arrives, even the air seems to sharpen. You can feel it in the silence that sweeps through the Greek lines, that collective awareness that something extraordinary has stepped onto the stage. The Trojans stand a little taller. The Greeks stare, half in disbelief, half in awe, because she isn't like the others. She's a queen from the east, an Amazon, warrior of Artemis, wearing armor that gleams like dusk and carrying a spear longer than most men. Her face, they say, could have been carved from moonlight itself. When she rides into battle, the wind seems to follow her, banners snapping like wings. Achilles watches from the edge of the camp, curious. He's fought princes, demigods, even river gods, but never someone quite like her. There's something almost serene about her confidence, as though she knows what fate has written for her, and has accepted it. That, of course, makes her his mirror. Historians still debate whether the Amazons were a real tribe, perhaps Scythian or Sarmatian horsewomen who terrified early Greek armies, or a mythic stand-in for every powerful woman Greek poets couldn't explain. Either way, Penthesilea's story endures because it makes Achilles hesitate. For the first time since Patroclus fell, he's fighting someone who reminds him what beauty looks like. The battle begins with a shriek that splits the sky. Arrows darken the air. The Greeks rush forward. Dust explodes from the plain. And then there she is, cutting through the chaos, spear flashing, chariot wheels spinning. She takes down two men before Achilles even moves. When he finally does, it's like the tide itself has turned to meet her. They clash. Bronze sings against bronze. The crowd around them fades. For a moment, it's just two brilliant, doomed figures locked in the dance of inevitability. You can feel the energy of it, the raw, electric charge that makes the gods lean forward in their seats. Then, the fatal moment. Penthesilea falters, just slightly, a glint of sunlight in her eyes. Achilles strikes. His spear finds its mark. She falls silently into the dust, and in that heartbeat of victory, everything shifts. He pulls off her helmet, maybe to gloat, maybe to honor, and what he sees steals the air from his lungs. She's young. Beautiful. Human. Her eyes, frozen now, still hold something like defiance. And Achilles, the great slayer, suddenly feels nothing like a hero. A strange quiet settles over the field. The Greeks cheer, but half-heartedly. Even Achilles doesn't hear them. He kneels beside her body, fingers brushing her cheek, and in that small gesture, you catch the faintest tremor of remorse. Later poets will say he fell in love with her in that instant, love born at the edge of a blade. Historians still argue whether that's true, or whether the moment simply reminded him too much of Patroclus, too much of everything he's lost. Either way, he orders her body treated with respect, refusing to let the soldiers mock her. She was braver than any man here, he says. No one dares to disagree, but even grief can't stop fate's momentum. A Trojan ally named Thersites laughs at Achilles, mocks him for weeping over a dead woman. Without hesitation, Achilles kills him too. It's a small, brutal reminder that he's still half god, still half fire, and still not entirely safe to be near. That night, the sea wind returns, bringing with it the sound of distant thunder, the gods murmuring, perhaps, about what's next. You sit beside Achilles as he stares into the flames. The armor beside him glows faintly, and you notice how his reflection flickers in the metal, ghostly and tired. He doesn't speak for a long time. When he does, it's soft, it's all ashes now. Every face fades. There's no answer. Only the sigh of the waves and the slow crackle of the fire. A quirky archaeological tidbit: in the ruins of ancient Troy, a shard of pottery was found showing a woman in Amazon armor lying before a man in shining bronze. Scholars call it the Achilles and Penthesilea vase, and no one can quite agree whether it depicts love, pity, or simply the moment when a hero realizes he's not a god after all. The war, though, doesn't pause for introspection. The Trojans bury their queen, the Greeks tighten their ranks, and somewhere beyond the horizon, Apollo begins to stir again. He hasn't forgotten his priest, his arrows, or his promise to balance the scales, and as you stand there watching Achilles, taller than the firelight, more shadow than man, you understand that he's circling the end now. Every step he takes is a step closer to that one small, fatal gap near his heel. The gods are patient. The fates are tireless. And the greatest warrior the world has ever known is finally running out of time. The smoke from Penthesilea's pyre fades, but its scent clings to Achilles like memory. He moves through the camp quietly now, speaking little, sleeping less. The men still revere him, but from afar, like he's already half shadow, the gods are watching. Especially Apollo, the sun god, remembers every slight, prophecies defied, temples desecrated, favored sons slain. It isn't rage that stirs him now, but balance. When Achilles storms into battle again, Apollo waits. The hero moves like a storm, armor gleaming with constellations, spear flashing arcs of light. Trojans scatter, terrified, yet drawn toward the center of his fury. He's past glory, past grief, fighting not to win, but to burn out bright. Then comes the river, the Scamander, swollen with blood and bodies, roars, "You've defiled me." Water rears like arms, fists of foam dragging Achilles down. The gods lean closer. Hera sends Hephaestus, and fire drives the river back. Steam fills the air. Achilles rises, drenched and furious, a living omen. He survives, but something shifts. He feels his time thinning. Priam sends envoys begging for peace. None comes. That night, Thetis rises from the mist. "My son," she whispers, "your death is near. But glory will outlast it." "Then let it come," Achilles answers. The pyre dies slowly, leaving behind only ash and the faint scent of burned bronze and salt. You might expect a hush to settle over the Greek camp, but the aftermath is anything but quiet. Soldiers wander like ghosts, dragging tired limbs across trampled sand, half listening to the waves whispering over Achilles' memory. The war hasn't ended, it's just entered a quieter, sorrowful phase. For a long while, the Trojans sit behind their walls, unsure how to respond. They have lost their greatest champion and queen, yet they survive. The Greeks have lost the man who made them tremble with pride and fear, yet they march on. It's the paradox that Homer loved: heroism doesn't stop death. It merely makes it larger, more dramatic, unforgettable. Historians still debate whether the funeral rites Homer describes, 7 days of mourning, sacrifices, and games, reflect real Mycenaean practice or poetic exaggeration. Archaeology finds some evidence of elaborate graves and pyres, but nothing to match the scale of Achilles' legend. It's a reminder that myths often outgrow reality, becoming mirrors for the human imagination. The Myrmidons linger near the sea, their spirits frayed. Patroclus' grave becomes a place of pilgrimage, a reminder that love can endure beyond life. Even the smallest acts of remembrance, touching the stones, laying flowers, whispering names, feel like rebellion against the inevitable. You see them, young warriors who once charged into fire, now trembling in their own grief. A quirky tradition says that crows and ravens circled the pyre for days, carrying fragments of ash to distant lands. People later interpreted it as a bad omen for the Trojans, but some poets suggested it symbolized the spread of Achilles' story, his fame carried across the world by feather and wind. You can almost picture it, black wings scattering memory like seeds. Meanwhile, the war drags on. Odysseus, Nestor, and the remaining leaders strategize, their plans shadowed by the absence of the man who once decided the fate of thousands with a single glance. Agamemnon, for all his authority, feels the hollow space where Achilles' presence once stood. He struggles to maintain control, to inspire the men who followed a demigod rather than a king. Back on Olympus, the gods debate the mortal world with an almost bureaucratic detachment. Zeus shakes his head, Hera complains, and Athena quietly notes that even the greatest hero cannot escape fate. The cosmic lesson is clear: all strength meets its match, even if that match is nothing more than a single arrow and the design of destiny. In quieter moments, the Greeks begin to tell stories, of Achilles laughing in Phthia, racing with Patroclus, weeping for Penthesilea, defying rivers, and facing the prophecy of his own death. Storytelling becomes a bridge between presence and absence, a way to keep the dead alive for those still walking the battlefield, and you, standing at the water's edge, notice that even the waves seem to carry fragments of the tale, whispers of bronze, echo of war cries, the laughter and lament of a man larger than life. The world keeps moving, but memory, like the tide, never forgets. Achilles' death marks a turning point, yet also a beginning. Legends grow where flesh and bone have failed, shaping imagination and culture for centuries. The Iliad, you realize, isn't just a story of a warrior, it's a story about what it means to live, to love, and to be remembered. The shadows lengthen. The sun dips toward the horizon, painting the sand gold and crimson. And in the glow, you almost hear a faint echo of Achilles' voice, carried on the wind: glory is fleeting, but memory endures. Time after Achilles' death feels strange, stretched and uneven. The war continues, but the rhythm has changed. You can see it in the way the soldiers move: less urgency, more weariness, more quiet reflection. Even the clatter of armor and shield seems muffled, as if the battlefield itself remembers the hero who once ruled it. Odysseus steps into the vacuum left by Achilles. His mind, always sharp, takes command with cunning rather than brute force. He plots, he strategizes, he negotiates. But you can sense, even from the shore, that something essential is missing. The heart of the war, the unstoppable force that was Achilles, cannot be replaced by cleverness or diplomacy. Historians still debate whether the post-Achilles phase of the Trojan War reflects real shifts in leadership or is simply narrative convenience. Some argue Homer used Achilles' death to explore the limits of mortal heroism, others see it as a reflection on the fragility of armies dependent on singular power. Either way, it marks a turning point in both story and morale. Meanwhile, the Trojans mourn quietly. Hector's son, Astyanax, hides behind the walls, learning what it means to inherit a legacy of bravery and sorrow. The city carries on, but every wall, every street, echoes the memory of those who fell, reminding all who remain that survival is often less glorious than death. A quirky fringe tale whispers that some Trojans kept small effigies of Achilles, believing that by honoring him they could curry favor with fate. Others say that the ghost of Patroclus wandered the camp, unseen, comforting his men and whispering warnings about pride and anger. You can almost picture it, the dead moving silently among the living, a reminder that stories live longer than bodies. The Greeks begin their slow, methodical approach to Troy. They build siege engines, plan ambushes, and exploit weaknesses, but nothing feels as decisive as when Achilles led the charge. The mythic edge, that divine spark, has vanished. Every step forward is now human-sized, calculated, and haunted. At night, Odysseus tells tales of Achilles' exploits. Soldiers whisper of his near-divine strength, his fiery temper, his tenderness toward Patroclus, and his brief, impossible love for Penthesilea. Even in absence, Achilles commands attention. Even in death, he teaches lessons about courage, grief, and the cost of pride. Historians still argue whether these posthumous stories were intended to glorify him or to caution against excess. Perhaps Homer left it ambiguous on purpose. Heroes are never simple, and neither are the legacies they leave behind. The gods, too, have shifted. Zeus observes quietly, Athena mourns quietly, and Apollo rests, content that his divine lesson has been delivered. Fate, inexorable as ever, continues to hum beneath the events of men and cities, and you, standing on the same sands where Achilles once ran, realize that the story isn't just about a warrior. It's about the echoes of one man's life, the laughter, the sorrow, the fury, and the fragile, enduring human heart behind the bronze and the legend. The war finally tilts toward its end. The air is tight with tension, soldiers move like shadows, and Troy's walls seem to know their fate is sealed. With Achilles gone, both armies have lost their fiercest champions. In the void, strategy takes the stage. Odysseus leads. He studies the city, listens to spies, and conceives the plan that will end it all, the Trojan horse. A hollow wooden colossus, offered as tribute to Athena, hiding the best of the Greek warriors. The Trojans, exhausted and divided, argue, gift or trap. Suspense thickens, the Greeks wait in hiding, remembering Achilles in every heartbeat. Inside Troy, silence reigns. Priam's family prays. Citizens sense the weight of history pressing down. Some say ghosts of heroes, Patroclus, Hector, Penthesilea, watch unseen. At night, the Trojans haul the horse inside. The Greeks lie still within, breaths held like coiled wire. When the city sleeps, the trap is sprung. Flames erupt. Panic consumes Troy. The Greeks strike fast and hard. Victory is brutal, efficient, and hollow. Achilles' absence shadows every step. Even dead, he shapes the ending. His rage and brilliance carved the path that brought them here. Homer reminds you, glory always walks hand in hand with grief.